document, so if I can have Mr. Arnold Blair please scroll down.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Do you recognize these photographs?
I do.
And how do you recognize them?
Because I took them.
When did you take them?
Mid-December 15th.
And why did you take these photographs?
I took them to show proof that he once again had injuries sustained in an altercation.
All right, any objection to 65?
No, Your Honor.
All right, 65 in evidence. It can be published.
And Mr. Bett, would you please describe what we're looking at here?
The first picture, there's a laceration on the left side of his nose. It looks like the left upper cheek has a slight bruise to it. And then on his forehead, right above the ridgeline, just almost to the center, it looks like there's a red scratch mark above his left eye and to the right.
Do you see that in the same subsequent pictures in page 2?
Okay, page 2, I see a scratch mark, a vertical scratch mark adjacent to his right ear on the right side of his face.
Same question for page 3.
Page 3, there's a scratch mark on the lower right portion of his chin. There's that same scratch mark on the center left side of his nose, and you can see the frontal portion of that bruise that's on the left side under his eye.
Were you surprised to see Mr. Depp with these injuries?
Objection, leading.
All right, I'll sustain as to leading.
Did you ever see any similar injuries on Miss Heard?
None.
Did you ever see any injuries on Miss Heard?
I didn't.
Did Miss Heard ever tell you she was being abused by Mr. Depp?
She didn't.
Did she ever ask you for help?
No.
Did you ever see any evidence that Miss Heard was being abused by Mr. Depp?
I did.
Turning to April 21st, 2016, Mr. Betts, do you remember anything about that day?
Yes, that was the day or evening that Miss Heard was celebrating her birthday with some friends.
Do you recall what birthday?
Where they got into another argument and she had struck him in the face.
All right,
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
sir, if you didn't see it, you can't testify to it, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The jury will strike that answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you with Mr. Depp when he attended the meeting that you mentioned earlier?
I was.
And if you know, who was that meeting with?
It was with his accountant,
And who is Mr. Depp's accountant?
Ed White.
And where did that meeting take place?
It took place at his old production office.
What happened after the meeting ended?
When the meeting ended, we drove to his West Hollywood address, which might have been maybe 5-10 minutes away. He had to go inside the house and retrieve something. I don't know what it was. We were only there a short period of time. And we were kind of rushing because, we had been running late because it was a birthday dinner. And then we eventually left thereafter and headed back down to the penthouses downtown Los Angeles.
And how would you describe Mr. Depp's demeanor after the meeting ended with Mr. White?
To me, he looked fine. You could tell he was in a hurry, and he was, telling me, okay, we got to hurry up and go to the house real quick before we go downtown. But other than that, he appeared fine to me.
And based on your observations, Mr. Bett, did Mr. Depp appear to you to be intoxicated?
He didn't.
I believe you testified that after you left the meeting, you went to Mr. Depp's home, his residence in West Hollywood, and then on to the Eastern Columbia building. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What happened after you arrived at the penthouses for Miss Heard's birthday dinner?
We went upstairs, and she was having a dinner with her friends, and one of the penthouses, I believe it was penthouse number 5. We entered the front door to that penthouse. Amber stood up. She walked towards Mr. Depp. She had a look of, you could tell she was upset, the fact that he was late. Mr. Depp apologized to everybody, apologized to Amber, and, told her, sorry, baby, or words to that effect for being late. She gave him a hug and a kiss and said, come sit down, sugar.
Was that a common nickname Miss Heard used for Mr. Depp?
Yes, she used to call him that quite frequently in front of me. Yes.
What do you recall about her health problems?
At that time, she was very critical. She had been suffering from cancer for some time, a few years, I believe. And at that stage, she was slowly deteriorating. So it was approximately a month before she passed.
She had passed away.
Mr. Depp told me.
And again, based on your observations, how would you describe Mr. Depp's demeanor when he informed you that his mother had passed away?
Well, he just lost his mother, so he was, you could tell he was, very sad, and he was mourning. And so I just left him alone until he needed me for whatever I had to do for him that day. When we first walked in, on the center island in the kitchen, there were candles lit on the table. There was a couple wine glasses that were empty, and there was a bottle of wine that was open. There was also music playing in the background through the speakers that were in the wall.
Did you see Miss Heard when you first entered the penthouse?
I did.
What happened after you entered the penthouses?
After we entered the penthouses, Jerry Judge told Johnny that myself and...
Yes.
Objection, here's.
All right. I'll sustain the objection. All right, next question.
Okay. Did you stay inside the penthouse with Mr. Judge and Mr. Depp?
No, shortly thereafter, Mr. Judge and I exited the penthouse and stood outside the door briefly.
How long would you estimate that you stood outside the door of the penthouse?
It would have been approximately maybe 10 minutes, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less.
Apologies, Mr. Bett. I meant on May 21st, 2016.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Did you observe Mr. Depp drinking any alcohol that day?
He might have had a glass of wine in the car, but as far as the entire day, I wouldn't have known how much he drank.
Did he appear intoxicated to you when he arrived to the Eastern Columbia building?
No.
So you went to the storage area of the penthouse area. How long were you there?
We might have been there maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes. We got something to drink, and then we exited that penthouse I described, or that penthouse storage area.
And where did you go next?
We walked down the hall towards Mr. Depp's penthouse, which would have been penthouse number 3.
And did you stand outside the door, or did you go in?
As we approached the door, we could hear the screaming and shouting from Miss Heard. So I immediately opened up the door and Mr. Judge and I ran in there.
What do you remember Ms. Heard screaming or shouting?
It appears she was shouting profanities. So once Mr. Judge and I went through the front door, Mr. Depp would have been standing directly in front of us, maybe about 20 feet, because parallel to us walking in or running in, there was a wall. It was the way the kitchen was set up, it was almost like an L shape. So you walk in, and then you'd have to make a left. So Mr. Depp would have been standing in front of us, and he glanced at us. As soon as Mr. Judge and I rounded the corner, I saw Ms. Heard standing next to her good friend, Raquel Pennington.
And how was Ms. Heard standing? Where were her hands?
Her hands would have been in this motion. Once Mr. Judge and I rounded that corner and she saw both Jerry and I, she had this look of surprise on her face, and then she looked at Mr. Depp and us, and she shouted out loud, "This is the last time you do this to me." At which point Mr. Depp looked at her and said, "What the hell are you talking about?" At that point, Mr. Judge tapped Mr. Depp on the arm and told him, "Boss, let's leave." So we gathered, there was a couple of computer bags that was right on a table, and we exited the front door to penthouse number 3.
Heard?
I did.
Did you have a clear view of her face?
I did.
Did you observe any injuries on Ms. Heard's face?
I did.
Did you see any redness?
I didn't.
Swelling?
None.
Was Ms. Heard holding her face?
She wasn't.
So what happened next?
We exited penthouse number 3 and we walked down the hallway. Right when we were getting close to penthouse number 5 door, Mr. Depp says, "I need to get in here and look for something." So I opened up the door for him. We went inside, and that's when I saw Miss Heard's friend, Raquel Pennington's boyfriend, Josh Drew, and another unknown female that I'd never seen before. And there was a small dog kind of walking around. Mr. Depp, I believe he said, "Get the fuck out of my apartment." So Mr. Drew nodded his head and basically said, "Okay." The female picked up the dog, and they exited the front door to that penthouse.
What did Mr. Depp do next?
He was walking around the kitchen area, living room area. He might have gone upstairs briefly. I can't remember. I don't know what he was looking for. I didn't ask him. Mr. Judge didn't ask him. Eventually, he didn't find whatever he was looking for, and we exited penthouse number 3.
And while Mr. Depp was in penthouse number 3, did you observe him cause any damage?
No.
Did you observe him cause any damage to any of the penthouses on May 21st, 2016?
No.
Did you see Mr. Depp become violent with anyone while at the penthouses on May 21st, 2016?
Objection leading.
I'll allow it. That's fine.
I didn't.
Mr. Bett, have you ever seen Mr. Depp become violent with Ms. Heard?
I haven't.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
All right. Are you